I've been doing the work. I'm catching my victim thoughts. I am noticing my expectations. But here's the thing. I go to work, and my colleague complains about money. I scroll social media, and everyone's talking about the recession. I talk to my mom, and she reminds me to be careful with spending. It feels like I'm swimming against a current. How do I change my belief when everyone around me is reinforcing the old one?
Wow, yeah, that invisible current is the exact wall that almost everyone hits when they first attempt to consciously shift their reality.
Right, it's so frustrating.
It's incredibly frustrating. You decide you're going to change, you start monitoring your inner landscape, and suddenly it feels like the sheer weight of the external world is actively organizing itself to pull you back under.
Yes, exactly, like a coordinated attack.
Yeah, and it can feel like a personal failure, honestly.
Hmm.
But to understand why this happens and, more importantly, how to actually break free from it, we have to look at a body of work that completely redefines the mechanics of reality itself.
Okay, I am so ready for this. What are we looking at?
I am talking about the Seth material. Specifically, the highly advanced teachings channeled by Jane Roberts on suggestion, telepathy, and mass beliefs.
Oh, the Jane Roberts channeling. Right.
Exactly. And to lay the absolute bedrock for everything we are going to unpack today, there is a line from the book, The Nature of Personal Reality, Chapter 3, that totally breaks our conventional understanding of how the world operates.
Okay, lay it on me.
Seth says, verbatim, "Your senses show you the results of your beliefs, not the beliefs themselves."
Wait, hold on. Let me just sit with that for a second. Your senses show you the results of your beliefs, not the beliefs themselves.
Yeah.
That is the exact opposite of how we are taught to function from the moment we are born. I mean, we are told that seeing is believing.
Right, seeing is believing, the ultimate trap.
Like, we look at our bank account, we see the number, and our brain processes that sensory data to form a belief, like, oh, I am broke.
Exactly.
But this quote implies that the belief was already there, and the physical number on the screen is just, well, the aftermath.
It is entirely the aftermath. To put it in modern terms, imagine you are playing a wildly complex video game. If your character walks into a wall or is standing in a barren, empty room, you don't try to change the game by taking a marker and drawing a door on your computer monitor.
Right, because the monitor is just the screen rendering the underlying code.
Exactly. It is merely the output. Your physical senses, what you see, hear, touch, and experience in your daily life, that's the computer monitor. They are just the final, delayed projection.
So my eyes and ears are just reporting the rendering.
Yes. Your beliefs are the code rendering the environment. And what actually compiles that code, the energy that forces the image into physical existence, is human emotion.
Emotion.
Yes. Which brings us to the second foundational quote we need to establish, this one from Chapter 4. The emotions are the driving force behind the physical construction.
The driving force behind the physical construction. So emotion isn't just a reaction to the construction, it's the actual engine building the world around us.
That is the core mechanism. And today, our mission for this deep dive is to completely map out this invisible, constantly active web of telepathic suggestion and the literal electromagnetic power of your emotion.
This is huge for anyone listening right now.
It really is. We are going to explore exactly how you are constantly telepathically interacting with the beliefs of everyone around you, whether you realize it or not. The goal here is to equip you with the exact mechanics to stop unconsciously absorbing limiting beliefs from your environment.
Okay, so if emotion and belief are the code, and my physical reality is just the monitor, I really need to understand the physics of how that code actually gets written and shared.
We have to dive into the mechanics.
Because I'm trapped in this daily loop. I'm trying to hold a new belief about abundance, but the environment, the complaining colleague, the news about the recession, my cautious mother, it feels like a coordinated attack of scarcity. What is actually happening there?
To understand that coordinated attack, we have to dive into Seth's diagnosis of mass beliefs. And it starts with the concept that challenges our deepest sense of individuality. Your beliefs are never private. Never.
Yay, never.
Never. According to Seth, human beings are engaged in a constant, unceasing telepathic interchange.
Constant telepathic interchange. Okay, let me just clarify, because when I hear the word telepathy, my mind goes straight to science fiction.
Oh, sure, mind-reading parlor tricks.
Yeah, like guessing what number someone is thinking of, or hearing literal voices in my head. We aren't talking about that, right?
No, not at all. We're talking about something much more fundamental and honestly much more invasive than parlor tricks. We're talking about the continuous broadcasting and receiving of core beliefs and emotional states.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in Chapter 3, Seth details what he calls the grouping of beliefs. He explains that thoughts and beliefs have a literal electromagnetic reality.
Electromagnetic reality, like physics.
Actual physics. They aren't just abstract philosophical concepts floating in some psychological void. They are energetic realities with a specific frequency and mass. And basic physics applies here, like attracts like. Similar ideas group about each other electromagnetically.
So if I hold a latent underlying belief that money is scarce, even if I'm consciously trying to say positive affirmations in the mirror every morning, that underlying subconscious belief has its own electromagnetic signature.
It is a massive electromagnetic signature. And because you are broadcasting that signature out into the world, you will telepathically align with others who are broadcasting on that exact same frequency.
I'm acting like a magnet.
Exactly. You will naturally, inevitably be drawn into conversations, situations, and environments that perfectly mirror that belief back to you. The colleague complaining about money isn't just a random annoyance that happened to bump into you.
We found each other.
You and that colleague have electromagnetically found each other in that moment because your underlying frequencies matched. You are grouping your beliefs together.
That is a staggering way to view social interaction. I mean, it's like we are all walking around as these highly complex, invisible radio towers, constantly emitting our inner emotional states, and our frequencies naturally entangle with matching frequencies.
Radio towers is a perfect analogy.
So when I walk into the office and feel that heaviness, that shared reality of scarcity, the complaining, the news on the TV in the break room, the collective anxiety, it isn't some sort of cosmic punishment.
Not at all.
It's not the universe testing me or saying, you don't deserve abundance. It's just the natural, entirely neutral organizing principle of consciousness. It's like gravity for thoughts.
Gravity for thoughts is an incredibly accurate way to visualize it. It is a completely neutral organizing principle. The universe does not judge the quality of the broadcast. It simply organizes the matching frequencies.
It just matches the signals.
Right. And if we pull back the lens and connect this to the bigger picture, specifically to the concepts outlined in the book, The Individual and the Nature of Mass Events, we can see how this localized office dynamic scales up to encompass the entire globe.
Okay, how big does this get?
Huge. Seth extrapolates this grouping of beliefs to explain how massive global events are formed. Economic recessions, cultural movements, sweeping political shifts.
Even like large-scale panics.
Yes. These don't just happen to us. They are not external forces visiting themselves upon a passive, victimized population. They are mass events generated by a critical mass of individual beliefs coalescing into physical reality.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around the scale. Are you saying a global recession is essentially millions of people telepathically agreeing on a frequency of lack and fear, and then that electromagnetic grouping becomes so dense, so charged, that it literally materializes as a collapsed housing market or massive layoffs?
It is the exact materialization of that shared psychic density. Individual beliefs flow into a massive collective formation, creating what Seth calls the psychic atmosphere of the planet.
Psychic atmosphere. I love that term.
It's very descriptive. Just as the physical atmosphere produces weather, hurricanes, droughts, sunny days, the psychic atmosphere produces mass events. And this framework perfectly explains why it feels so incredibly difficult, so exhausting, to change your mind when everyone else is panicking.
Because you're fighting the weather.
Precisely. When you decide to shift your belief, when you try to adopt a mentality of abundance and opportunity in the exact middle of a recession, you aren't just changing a thought in your head. You are actively trying to step out of a massive, heavily charged telepathic field.
You're trying to unhook yourself from the consensus reality, and that has to require an enormous amount of energy. You are withdrawing your own psychic energy from a massive shared electromagnetic grid that your friends, your family, and your culture are all still plugged into.
It takes immense effort.
No wonder it feels like swimming against a current. You are literally pulling your plug out of the wall.
It is a profound act of withdrawal. And Seth notes that stepping out of these mass telepathic fields can feel incredibly isolating at first.
Oh, I bet.
You might feel a sudden, inexplicable loneliness because you are quite literally unhooking your consciousness from the shared frequency of your peers. You are intentionally tuning your radio dial to a station that no one around you is listening to. The silence can be deafening.
So my colleagues complaining isn't just annoying, it's actually reinforcing my old belief telepathically.
It is absolutely reinforcing it. every single time you listen, every time you emotionally engage with that complaining, every time you feel that knot of anxiety form in your stomach while they speak, you are plugging right back into their frequency.
Yeah, and that's dangerous.
You are accepting their telepathic suggestion and reinforcing the electromagnetic bond of that limiting belief.
Okay, if I'm trapped in this telepathic grid of scarcity and I can't just casually think my way out of it because the current is too strong, uh, what is the actual physics of breaking out?
Well, we have to look at how beliefs materialize.
Right, because it's one thing to say thoughts are things, which is a cliche we've all heard a million times, but Seth goes much deeper than that. He talks about the actual subatomic mechanics of this process.
He goes into exhaustive detail, and this is where the material transitions from philosophy to physics. In Chapter 4, and extensively in the book, Seth Speaks, he breaks down the precise mechanism by which a non-physical belief becomes a solid physical event, and the entire mechanism pivots on emotion.
Okay, emotion.
We mentioned earlier that thoughts have an electromagnetic reality. Seth identifies these as EE units, or electromagnetic energy units. Every thought, every feeling, every fleeting image in your mind exists spontaneously as an EE unit.
So they are actual things.
They are the invisible subatomic building blocks of matter. They exist just beneath the range of physical matter, currently beyond the reach of our scientific instruments. But they are very real, and they follow specific laws.
Let me try to visualize this. If a thought is an EE unit, it's like a raw material. It's a brick. But a brick sitting on the ground doesn't build a house by itself. It has no momentum. It needs a force to lift it and place it.
Emotion is that force. Emotion is the electrical charge, the voltage, that propels the EE units. According to Seth, when a thought or a mental image is accompanied by strong emotion, that emotional intensity acts as a high-powered propellant.
It launches the brick.
It literally shoots the electromagnetic signal out of our three-dimensional reality and into an invisible dimension that Seth calls Framework 2.
Wait, hold on. You lost me slightly at Framework 2. Let's unpack that, because it sounds like we just jumped into another dimension. If Framework 1 is my everyday reality, my kitchen, my office, the traffic on my commute, where exactly is Framework 2? Is it just a psychological concept in my head, or is it an actual place?
Think of it as the ultimate backstage area of reality.
Backstage?
If we go back to our video game analogy, Framework 1 is the screen you are looking at, the physical world. Framework 2 is the server where all the game's calculations are actually happening. It is the invisible psychological environment where events are constructed, mixed, and finalized before they drop into our physical world. It is the kitchen where the meal is cooked before it is served in the dining room of Framework 1. You cannot see the kitchen from the dining room, but everything you eat comes from there.
That makes perfect sense. So Framework 2 is where the code is compiled.
Yes. Framework 2 is where your thoughts instantly form patterns, where they merge with the matching thoughts of others to create the psychological conditions that will eventually materialize. And emotion is the vehicle that transports your intent into Framework 2.
The emotion does the transporting.
Emotion is the charge that constructs the event in the unseen world and then draws the corresponding physical event back into Framework 1.
So let's apply this to my morning routine. If I am standing in front of my mirror, repeating a hollow, positive affirmation, I am wealthy, my career is thriving, I have an abundance of money, but internally, my chest is tight, I feel terrified about my rent, and I feel fundamentally broke.
The signal is completely mismatched.
Right. The thought, I am wealthy, has almost zero electromagnetic charge. It's like a radio station transmitting with a broken antenna. It's a weak signal, like a 1-watt signal. But the emotion of terror, that is a 1,000,000-watt amplifier.
Exactly.
The fear is taking the underlying belief of scarcity, amplifying it with 1,000,000 watts of power, shooting it into Framework 2, and forcing the physical world to materialize the exact thing I'm terrified of.
You have described the exact trap. The physical materialization in your life is a completely neutral result. The universe, or Framework 2, doesn't judge whether the emotion is good or bad, whether it is profound joy or paralyzing terror.
It just reads the voltage.
It simply responds to the intensity of the voltage. The emotion organizes the subatomic reality, the EE units, into physical form. The stronger the emotion, the faster and more rigid the physical construction.
I have to be honest, this all sounds incredibly empowering on one hand, but utterly terrifying on the other.
Oh, it's a double-edged sword.
If our emotions and beliefs are literally constructing our reality down to the subatomic level, and we are simultaneously being bombarded by the telepathic suggestions of a collective psychic atmosphere that is steeped in fear, How do we actually defend ourselves? How do we hold our own frequency when the entire world is shouting a different reality at us?
To understand how to survive and actually thrive in that kind of hostile psychic environment, we don't have to look at hypothetical examples. We need to look at someone who experienced this exact dynamic in the most intense, visceral, and public way possible. We need to look at the life of Jane Roberts herself.
The woman who actually channeled the Seth material.
Yes, we have to ground this esoteric theory in her actual physical reality, because her story is the ultimate proof of how powerful these mass telepathic fields are, the incredible effort it takes to break free from them, and the devastating consequences if you fail to manage the emotional charge.
So what was happening to her?
Well, when Jane first began speaking for Seth in the early 1960s, she was deeply embedded in highly intellectual academic and literary circles. Her husband, Robert Butts, was an artist, and she was a prolific writer. They lived in an environment that heavily prized rational, conventional intellectual thought.
Right. And suddenly, this rational writer is going into deep, spontaneous trances in her living room, speaking with a different voice, for an entity who claims to be a non-physical personality. You can imagine the reaction of her social circle. In the 1960s, that wasn't exactly dinner party conversation.
The reaction was intense, heavy skepticism.
Hmm.
And remember what we just learned about telepathy and the grouping of beliefs? Jean wasn't just dealing with people politely disagreeing with her to her face.
She was feeling it.
She was being bombarded by a massive, unspoken telepathic broadcast from her peers, her culture, and the entire scientific establishment of the time. The telepathic suggestion hitting her day and night, the invisible current she was swimming against was, "This is crazy. You are losing your mind. This is an elaborate subconscious fabrication. You are a fraud."
Wow, that is a tremendously heavy psychic atmosphere to live inside. If she had simply absorbed that telepathic suggestion, if she had let her localized psychic network entangle with theirs, she would have stopped channeling completely. She would have internalized the belief that she was experiencing a psychological breakdown, and the Seth material would have never been recorded.
She would have completely shut down. And the defense against that required an enormous amount of conscious, deliberate effort. Jane had to consciously and forcefully withdraw her psychic energy from that specific mass belief field.
She had to put up a wall.
She had to recognize the telepathic suggestion for what it was, a localized projection of their limiting beliefs, and actively refuse to accept it as her reality.
But based on what we just discussed about emotion being the amplifier, she couldn't just intellectually defend herself. She couldn't just sit there and think, I'm not crazy. She needed a stronger emotional signal to override the million-watt static of external doubt. What was the actual emotional fuel that kept her connection to the Seth material strong?
It was her own emotions of profound curiosity, deep wonder, and sheer intellectual excitement.
Excitement.
Yes.
Yes.
Every single time she had a session, the material Seth delivered was so incredibly challenging, so expansive, and so beautifully complex that it filled her with genuine, undeniable excitement. That emotion, that high-frequency, high-voltage fuel is what kept the signal strong. Her excitement generated the highly charged E units necessary to maintain the bridge to Seth, completely overriding the telepathic skepticism of the outside world.
It's a perfect example of what Seth means when he says you aren't at the mercy of your subconscious or your environment. You can use your conscious mind, fueled by deliberate emotion, to direct your reality. But, and this is the elephant in the room that we absolutely have to address, it's crucial to acknowledge that this struggle was not just a theoretical psychological exercise for Jane. It took a devastating physical toll on her. If she was the master of this material, we have to talk about what happened to her body.
We do. It is a sobering, profoundly important part of this deep dive, and it is the aspect of the Seth material that challenges people the most. Throughout the years of producing this incredible philosophy of limitless reality, Jane suffered from severe, crippling physical symptoms.
It's really sad.
It is. She developed profound rheumatoid arthritis, and it didn't just cause her discomfort, it progressed to the point where she was essentially immobilized.
Yeah, we have the introductory notes written by her husband, Robert Butts, for the book Dreams, Evolution, and Value Fulfillment. And the details he provides are just heartbreaking. He describes her in early 1982, weighing 82 pounds, having to be admitted to the hospital.
It was incredibly difficult.
He writes about the sheer physical indignity of it. Her bony, rigid frame being lifted onto portable commodes by strangers, the severe bed sore, the decubitus ulcers that bloomed on her pressure points. She lost almost all of her hearing temporarily. Her thyroid gland essentially ceased functioning.
It is a stark, brutal picture of physical decline. It is harrowing to read. And the natural question, the inevitable skepticism that any critical thinker has to ask is, if Jane Roberts had direct access to this profound material about creating your own reality, why was she suffering so immensely? Did the philosophy fail her? Was it all just words?
That is the exact pushback. People point to Jane's illness, they look at the 82 pounds and the bed sores, and they say, see, it doesn't work. She couldn't even heal herself. How do we reconcile the brilliant architect of this philosophy being trapped in a failing physical structure?
We reconcile it by looking closely at the private sessions Seth held specifically for Jane and Robert, because Seth addressed this paradox directly. He explained that her physical immobility was not a failure of the philosophy. It was, in fact, the most brutal, literal proof of it.
Wait, her being crippled was proof that she was creating her reality? How?
Because Seth explained that her severe arthritis wasn't just a random disease that invaded her body, and it wasn't just an abstract belief that she accidentally picked up. It was a literal physical manifestation, a rendering in Framework 1 that was held rigidly in place by a specific, highly charged emotional state. And that primary million-watt emotion was fear.
Fear of what?
Specifically, a fear connected to a deep-seated psychological concept that Seth called her sinful self.
The sinful self, let's unpack that, because I think this is a concept that affects so many people, even if they don't use that exact terminology. What did the sinful self mean in Jane's specific context?
Jane grew up in a very rigid environment, with a deeply ingrained, almost subconscious Catholic belief in the inherent flaw, the inherent sinfulness of the human self. Even though as an adult she consciously rejected traditional religious dogma, that deep-seated emotional fear remained embedded in her code.
Right, the programming runs deep.
Exactly. As she began channeling Seth, and the material grew in popularity and profundity, she felt an immense, crushing pressure to be super perfect. She believed that to handle this massive psychic ability, to be worthy of delivering this pure material to the world, she herself had to be flawless.
That's a lot of pressure.
She was terrified of her own spontaneous human impulses. She was terrified that if she moved too fast, lived too freely, or engaged too deeply in the messy physical world, she would make a mistake, contaminate the material, or be rejected.
So the fear wasn't about the material itself, it was a fear of her own human nature. And so to protect the work, she literally created a physical condition that prevented her from moving. Seth says that this fear, this superhuman self-image of the sinful self that must be restrained, encased her body as if in concrete.
As if in concrete, yes.
The arthritis wasn't a punishment, it was her own body perfectly, flawlessly mirroring her subjective emotional state of rigid, fearful restraint.
Exactly. Her body was just the monitor displaying the code. The body is the physical construction of the soul's idea of itself. Jane's body was faithfully, mechanically executing the commands sent by her intense emotional state. And Seth pointed out the profound, tragic irony in this. By adopting these severe physical limitations, she was attempting to protect herself from the chaotic, unpredictable nature of physical life.
By physically binding herself.
Yes, the arthritis forced her to sit still. It forced her to focus entirely on the mental and psychic work of the sessions. Her belief demanded restriction, and her body supplied it.
But the takeaway here, the crucial lesson for the listener who might be dealing with their own physical or environmental manifestations, is what this proves about the mechanism of change. Seth told Jane that shifting the physical condition required shifting the underlying emotional charge.
The charge is everything.
The physical illness, the stiff joints, the 82-pound frame, that wasn't the root problem. That was just the end result of the EE units materialized by a lifetime of fear and the impossible demand for perfection.
Let's take that a step further, because what happened in the hospital is fascinating. While she was in the hospital experiencing the absolute vulnerability of having nurses look at her frail body, enduring the complete loss of her independence, something remarkable happened.
Oh, really?
Seth noted that her super-perfect, impractical self-image simply fell away. It could not survive such a situation. Stripped of all her defenses, forced to accept physical help for her most basic bodily needs, she found a sense of camaraderie with the hospital staff. She found what Seth called a vulgar physical optimism.
She realized she didn't have to be a perfect, ethereal, flawless channel. She was allowed to just be a messy, flawed physical creature asking for help.
Exactly.
And Seth noted that because that rigid, perfect image finally cracked, her native, more realistic image could begin to operate. It allowed for the possibility of healing because the emotional voltage had shifted. It proves Seth's point entirely. Your physical environment, including the very flesh on your bones, is the exact materialization of your emotional intensity.
Which brings us to the most important part of this entire discussion, the pivot. We've diagnosed the problem. We've seen how mass beliefs group together telepathically in the office and the world.
Right.
We've seen how emotion acts as the million-watt amplifier to materialize those beliefs into physical reality. And we've seen the extreme, undeniable physical toll it takes if we let fear and rigid expectations dictate that emotional charge. Now, we must move from diagnosis to application. How do you, listening right now, take conscious control of this electromagnetic reality?
This is what we promised at the beginning of the episode, the actionable mechanics. If the world is broadcasting scarcity, how do I build a firewall? How do I stop absorbing the fear and limiting beliefs in my environment?
We have two highly connected, incredibly practical techniques drawn directly from Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 of this material. Technique 1 is what we call spotting the telepathic suggestion.
Okay, let's walk through this practically. Let's go right back to the scenario that opened the deep dive. I'm at work, standing in the break room, and my colleague starts venting. It's so hard to make money these days. The economy is an absolute disaster. Nobody is getting ahead. We're all just treading water.
A classic telepathic broadcast.
Right. Historically, my reaction would fall into one of two traps. Trap 1, I would nod, agree to be polite, and immediately feel a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. Trap 2, I would try to argue with them, defensively telling them to be more positive, pulling up economic stats to prove them wrong.
Both of those historical reactions are disastrous if you were trying to change your reality. If you nod, agree, and feel the anxiety in your stomach, you are absorbing their frequency. That physical feeling in your gut is the literal sensation of electromagnetic entanglement. You are letting their EE units merge with yours.
Yeah.
You are accepting the code.
About arguing.
But the urge to argue, which feels like the right thing to do, is just as dangerous.
Wait, why? If I argue, aren't I defending my own positive belief? Aren't I pushing back against the scarcity?
No, you aren't defending yourself. You are entangling yourself. When you argue, you engage massive emotional energy. You get frustrated, defensive, maybe even angry that they're being so negative. And remember the core rule. What does emotion do?
It amplifies.
It amplifies. By arguing with their belief, you are focusing intensely on their reality of scarcity. You are pouring your high-voltage emotional energy into their framework. You are feeding their rendering engine. You become electromagnetically locked into their frequency.
So resisting the suggestion actually ties me to it. That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
If agreeing is bad and arguing is bad, what is the alternative? How do I stand in that break room?
You deploy the psychic firewall. When that colleague speaks, you do not argue and you do not absorb. You simply observe. You recognize that what they are saying is not an objective fact about the universe. It is a localized broadcast of their specific, limited belief system.
So I just listen.
And internally, while they are speaking, you deploy a very specific mental script. You say silently to yourself, that is a telepathic suggestion from their belief system. I do not have to accept it.
That is a telepathic suggestion from their belief system. I do not have to accept it. That is brilliant. It immediately detaches you from the emotional weight of their words. You are acknowledging that the broadcast is happening, but you are consciously turning off your receiver. You neutralize the code by denying it the fuel of your emotional engagement.
That's the exact mechanism. You leave their reality with them. You maintain the integrity of your own psychic atmosphere. But neutralizing the negative isn't enough. Simply blocking the bad code doesn't write new code. You have to actively construct the positive reality. Which brings us to technique 2, the 60-second feeling pivot.
This is where we leverage the physics of emotion, the EE units, and framework 2 that we talked about earlier.
Right. Throughout your day, you will inevitably encounter feelings of lack, fear, or doubt. It happens to everyone. The goal isn't to become an emotionless robot who never has a negative thought. The goal is to pivot the electromagnetic charge before it materializes in Framework 1.
So catch it early.
When that feeling of lack arises, maybe you look at a bill or you think about a project that isn't going well, the practice is to immediately pause. Take 3 deep breaths. This breaks the physiological momentum of the anxiety. And then you ask yourself this very specific question. What would it feel like if this were already resolved?
What would it feel like if this were already resolved? I love the phrasing of that because you aren't asking how to resolve it. You aren't engaging the intellect to figure out the step-by-step logistics of solving the problem. You are bypassing the how and going straight for the emotional end state.
That distinction is everything. The intellect will just spin its wheels trying to figure out the logistics in Framework 1, which is like trying to change the video game by shouting at the monitor.
Shouting at the screen never works.
Exactly. You need to bypass the monitor and go straight to Framework 2. You have to locate the exact feeling of the resolution, whether that is profound financial relief, a sense of physical ease, deep gratitude, or absolute security. You locate that feeling in your body and you hold it for exactly 60 seconds.
I have to push back here. Come on, 60 seconds. If changing reality were that easy, wouldn't everyone be millionaires? What makes the 60 seconds different from the toxic positivity we see everywhere on social media, where people just paste a fake smile over their trauma?
It's a vital question. The difference between toxic positivity and the 60-second pivot is the literal physics of what is happening. Toxic positivity is a thought without emotion. It's the 1-watt signal. It's repeating, "I am happy," while feeling terrified.
Right, the mismatch again.
The 60-second hold is not about ignoring reality. It is an act of concentrated electromagnetic generation. Think about what happens in those 60 seconds. At second 10, your mind will try to wander back to the problem. At second 30, you might feel a spike of doubt. But if you force yourself to hold the genuine bodily sensation of relief for a full minute, you bypass the intellect entirely.
You are flooding the system.
By holding that feeling of security, you are actively generating a literal magnetic force. You are flooding your nervous system and the subatomic space around you with highly charged EE units. You are sending a 1,000,000-watt signal directly into Framework 2. To underline just how literal this is, I want to read this quote verbatim from Seth Speaks. The emotions send out electromagnetic patterns that are then materialized.
The emotions send out electromagnetic patterns that are then materialized. It's not a metaphor. The 60-second pivot isn't just a psychological trick to lower your heart rate. It is an act of literal subatomic architectural construction. You are building the mold in Framework 2 that the physical event will pour into.
Yes. You're taking the raw material of the universe and stamping it with the electromagnetic pattern of your desired reality. And if you do this consistently, if you maintain the integrity of that code, the physical world has no choice but to eventually mirror that pattern back to you.
Okay. This brings us to the execution. We've covered the theory of telepathy, the diagnosis of mass beliefs, the extreme physical reality of Jane Roberts demonstrating how rigid beliefs cripple the body, and the mechanics of the pivot. Now, we want to give you, the listener, a direct mission, a way to prove this material to yourself within the next 24 hours.
It is a two-part exercise, directly utilizing the mechanics we've just discussed. Part 1 is focused on your psychic defense. Sometime today, I want you to notice exactly one telepathic suggestion in your environment.
Just one.
Just one. It could be a news headline predicting economic disaster, a friend complaining about their bad luck, or even your own internal mental chatter repeating an old fear of the sinful self. When you notice it, do not argue with it. Do not panic. Just silently, consciously state, "That's a suggestion. I decline."
That's a suggestion I decline. Build the firewall. Cut the code off before it compiles. And part 2 is the offense. Perform the 60-second feeling pivot once today. Pick a small, simple desire. It doesn't have to be making $1 million or curing a chronic disease. Pick something manageable to test the physics.
Like a free cup of coffee or a smooth commute.
Yes, exactly. When you think of it, if you feel any sense of lack or impatience that it isn't here yet, pause. Take those 3 breaths. Ask yourself what it would feel like if you already had it. Generate that specific feeling of having it, the relief, the joy, the ease, and hold it for 60 uninterrupted seconds. Generate the magnetic force.
Prove to yourself that you can control the electromagnetic patterns you are sending out into Framework 2. Observe how it subtly changes the events and interactions of your day.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a mind-bending concept to mull over. We've talked a lot today about telepathy between people, how our thoughts group together, and how our emotions organize the physical world. But in the wider Seth material, specifically in the book The Unknown Reality, Seth introduces an idea that takes this entire framework to a different level. He states that the cells of your body possess a precognitive comprehension.
A precognitive comprehension, meaning the cells themselves, the physical matter of your body, already know the future.
Exactly. They already know the path to your greatest fulfillment. They are intimately, subatomically connected to the probabilities of your life. So I want you to think about this as you go about your day. What if that feeling of profound relief you get during this 60-second pivot isn't just your imagination?
What if it's real?
What if it isn't just you trying to trick yourself into feeling good? What if that sensation of relief is literally your consciousness communicating telepathically with your own cells, aligning with a future that already exists?
Think about the implications of that.
Mm-hmm.
It means the feeling of the wish fulfilled is actually a memory of a probable future. You aren't forcing the universe to bend to your will against the current. You are simply tuning your cellular radio dial to the reality that has already been created for you in Framework 2.
You are finally stepping out of the murky, muddy waters of mass belief and recognizing your true position in the universe. You are the projector, not the screen. You are the code, not the monitor. As you go through your day, ponder your own cellular telepathy. Remember that every emotion you feel is a literal electromagnetic blueprint. So what are you building next?